Hello everyone. So today for some patron-only content, I wanted to offer a little quick discussion about Samhain. Seems appropriate since the holiday is coming up now in a few more weeks. And it's also one of those holidays that we have a lot of basic information about out there, but there's also a lot of little details and trivia that don't always get touched on. So none of this is going to be groundbreaking necessarily, but it's good, useful information, and it may be fun trivia that you're not already familiar with. So when we look at the dating of Samhain, of course, in modern American culture, particularly the secular view of Samhain, or Halloween, of course, which is what it's called here, we always tend to date it on October 31st. However, when we look back into the mythology and the oldest written material we have that reference this holiday, we find pretty explicitly and clearly that the date of Samhain would always have been November 1st. And this is because all of the significant fire festivals, all of the significant holidays, were always placed on the calends of the month, the first of the month. Calends is a Latin term, just basically means the first of the month. And we see this applying to Samhain, which would have been November 1st, applying to Bealchina, which would have been May 1st, Lunasa, August 1st, and so on. Imbolc as well, by the way, would have been February 1st. And it's interesting to note that this holiday was so significant, in fact, that the entire month of November in Irish is named after it, Mina Samhain, or month of Samhain. So we can kind of conclude just from that it has been a significant holiday for a very, very long time, and it would originally have been dated in November 1st, at least as long as the Julian or Gregorian calendars were in effect in that area. Obviously, prior to that period, how it was dated is a very large open question. It's also worth noting that considering Samhain a single-day holiday is a fairly modern thing. There's a lot of evidence that it was probably originally at least a 3-day celebration. Even in the wider Celtic world, if we look, for example, at the Coligny calendar in Gaul, we see a reference to a very similarly named holiday, which took 3 days. It was literally named the 3 days of Seminos, I think it is. I'm going to mess the name of that up because I'm not fluent with the Gaulish, but the name clearly linguistically connects it to Samhain. And we also find a lot of folk beliefs and folk practices connected to the Irish and the Scottish practice of Samhain, or Savin, I think is how it's pronounced in Gaelic, that would associate it with 3 days as opposed to 1. And each 3-day would have a slightly different focus or a slightly different thing going on, but we know that all 3 days would have been significant and would have been related directly to Samhain in some sense. Obviously, November 1st became associated with, I believe it's All Souls Day or All Saints Day in the Catholic Church, most likely as an attempt to shift people away from the older Samhain celebrations and into Catholic ones. It's also worth noting that while Samhain itself is November 1st, the night before that, Ihauna was, night or evening of Samhain, was also extremely significant. And that is likely because, although we don't have any solid evidence of this, the majority of scholars agree on this, so it's one of those things we can kind of strongly assume, as much as I hate the word assume, we can kind of strongly assume this, that the evening before would have been the beginning of the next day. There's a lot of suggestion that the Celts more broadly, and the Irish during the Celtic language period, during the Celtic cultural period, which basically would have been the Iron Age, would have started the next day at sunset. It's very different from the Latin calendar approach, but it is not unique to the Celts. There are other cultures and other religions that time things that way. So we see this idea that Samhain would have started on Ihauna the night before and then gone into the calends, the first of the month, the next day on Samhain itself. And we sort of see this idea of the holiday beginning the evening before and then going into the next day. It's particularly interesting for me, being here in the United States, because in the United States, of course, we have the secularized Halloween, which is originally rooted in the older Samhain, but very, very different and modified today. But we do see interesting phenomena that occurs where we have Halloween on October 31st. But culturally, going back decades and decades, at least to the 60s and 70s, and further if you really trace it back, we see this idea of October 30th, the night before Halloween, being called Devil's Night, and being a night that would range from sort of fairly harmless mischief to outright devilry, as it were, shenanigans in the oldest sense. Detroit, for example, particularly in the 70s and 80s, was known to have rashes of arson that would occur on Devil's Night, specifically because of Devil's Night. So we see this interesting sort of cross-cultural phenomena, this transcendent phenomena, where the night before the celebration of either Samhain or Halloween also seems to have its own profound significance. I don't know exactly why that is, but it does seem to hold true whether we're looking at the original November 1st dating of Samhain and then Ihauna following the night before, which then ended up becoming, over time and into the modern period, the more significant focus. And then we see in the United States, with the emphasis on Halloween being October 31st, this Devil's Night coming into occurrence on October 30th, the night before. So energetically, there's clearly something going on with that, although we can't obviously say exactly what. So that is some interesting things to note about Samhain. Interesting things to consider. Also, some fun vocabulary terms for today. Samhain is the most common Irish pronunciation for it. It is different in Scottish Gaelic. I believe they do Samhain. They do the V for the MH instead of the W. But again, I'm not a fluent Gaelic speaker. That's my best understanding of it. Ihauna is the night before, literally night of Samhain. And then we see Mina Sauna as the month of Samhain, the name for the month of November. I'd also note, just emphasizing the importance of this particular holiday, Bealtaine, which is May 1st, which is another very significant holiday. The month of May is named after that date. So then we see this sort of idea that these really significant holidays, that entire following month, then would be named after that holiday, Lunasa, for the month of August as well. So some food for thought for everyone. A little bit of trivia, some vocabulary terms. Hopefully you all found this really interesting. If everyone has any questions about Samhain, please feel free to ask in the comments. I can certainly do more videos or, dig deeper into this. It's a fascinating topic and there is a lot of information to get into about Samhain. So I think that'll cover it for today though. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Have a nice October.